welcome to those who weren't at the first meeting here. So before we get started, how about if we just go around the table and introduce ourselves? You tell me your name and who you're with, and are you legal assistants, or are you a water engineer, or a board member, or whatever your position is on the mental health district of the agency. I'm Kurt Schlegel. I'm the commissioner from District 2 in the Upper West Side of the county, at least for the next 5 minutes.
I'm a director of community development services.
Elbert County Eddie, Elbert County Manager. Seaside Enforcement Assistance. Dave Stone, Manager for the town of Langdon, and also the District Director for Public Safety. LB, Bridge Director District. Ryan Batiste, I'm with Kurt Weber's Palm District and General Counsel.
You guys don't sit together.
I'm Sean O'Hare, industry consultant for the Downtown County.
I'll move to the Southern Maine Law.
Ryan Schroeder, President for
Mike Gibbs, Town of Public Works Director.
Outstanding. Thank you. Did everybody sign in? Perfect. And we'll have to chat this round. Talk to a little about you. Steve's very highly rated. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So if you remember, we had an initial meeting about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it was primarily just for the commissioners and the staff to meet with the local metropolitan district representatives. And those are districts that have a relationship with water and sewer in the county. Just to give you a little, for the folks that weren't here, to give you a little recap as to what I'm thinking of, what we're thinking of is we've got a master plan for development in the county. We've got a master road plan for the western Elbert County. We've got a master plan for our fairgrounds, but we don't have a master plan for any water or sewer infrastructure in the county. There are several, come on up, Dick. There are several entities in the county that have systems or infrastructure in place, but really there's no tie-in between most of them. We just did a little informal presentation, so you brought 5 minutes PowerPoint. If you could just tell everybody who you are and who you are.
I'm Dick Easton, Town Administrator, Town of Elizabeth.
Rachel Hudson, community development director, Town of Elizabeth.
Thank you very much. And so the idea is, for those of you who may have been in Elbert County for a while, or for those who may be new to Elbert County, water has been a 4-letter word for a lot of years. It's caused a lot of consternation, both politically and just for the general populace. And so what my idea is to formulate a master plan for infrastructure for water and sewer in the county. Regardless of where the development happens or the growth happens, we need to have a plan to know that if somebody wants to come in with a commercial development or a residential development, we can't just keep sticking straws in the ground in the aquifers. And we've got to look at some better way to treat our sewage instead of just running out of the beach fields. So what I'm interested in, and what I would like to see come out of this, is a plan so that wherever the development happens, we know what's required of the local governments, of the developers, or whoever's playing those pieces in there as to what needs to be in place for that permitting process and for the build out of that area. So that was the reason for the first meeting, was just to bring together all the water districts. Now granted, not all of the water districts are represented here today. Invitations were sent out to everybody. Some decided to play, some haven't decided to play yet. But I think that it's going to, interest is going to grow as we continue through the planning process. I asked each of you to bring a few things to the table today, but I just want to kind of lay out what I foresee happening and how we foresee this happening. Sat down with Ed and Sean and Will from Forestry and talked about how we can do this. I've never built a water system before. I've never planned for a water or sewer system before. And we have one person on staff that has, and that's Ed, because he's worked on that. And so what my vision is I want to let the professionals tell us what we need for any development in the county, because we don't have that expertise. And so we need to lean on the professionals, and you're all part of that professional. But primarily what my vision is to have our services agreement with Sean's Fund. We're looking at, waiting for proposals from Forsman to see what that would look like. The idea here, though, isn't to spend a lot of money in this initial process. It's just to kind of put together a draft, see where we're going, and then have that presented by staff to the Florida County Commissioners. And that way we can make a decision how we're going to move forward, how it would be funded, and what we see as the process moves along. Any questions? And so, what I'm looking at, and I've talked with Sean a little bit, is kind of an aggressive schedule. But I think we need to not spend a lot of time just biting at the edges. We need to figure out where we need to go. And so what I would like to put out there is that we're going to work with Forest Grid and with Sean's firm. And I would like to throw out and say that we want a draft plan by December 15th. So that we can see what it looks like, and then we can decide how to build out from there.
So I actually do have a question.
Okay.
How has been any system like this built? For any system you're planning for, right? There's got to be sort of a scope in terms of what your plan is to support that system. So without knowing what that usually looks like for Elbert County or where that starts, most of the points, we know we need to have more of a system that we're talking about.
Sure.
Do you have sort of an idea or an overview of what you see in the next 5 years relative to infrastructure planning or tracking?
Sure. Well, and I'm not a developer. I can tell you that we're getting some more, a little bit more interest from developers about growing in the county, but there's nobody banging down the door at this point.
I guess the concern is, not even a concern, just a question is, how do we know whatever that master plan on the other side of this process looks like, will support what we were expecting?
Well, that's a good question, if I may. This is probably going to happen concurrently with other modules of updating the master plan. And modules is just a word I'm grabbing right now. But the master plan will have the water components to it, it will have a road component to it, it will have open space components to it. And in a sense right now, those are being addressed by other entities. We've got an outside entity that's interested in doing an open space plan for us. We need to update our master plan. So I think the core center of the master plan will be being done by our department. We're actually looking at doing that at the same time. So I think that it would probably be ideal to have you started it a little sooner so that we can be more developed for you all or whoever it is, Inertia and Ed and that to leverage off of. But I think that we will get some good information at the same time and be able to plug it into this plan as we discover it.
Sure. I know this is a start point too.
Yeah.
Like everything else, we wrote the transportation master plan, we wrote the fairgrounds master plan. Each plan has a very deliberate phasing that goes with it. So, a 5-year window, a 10-year window, a 25-year window are how we quantify the way a system could be built over time. And along with that, how are we going to fund it? Because the one thing about the master plan that the county has right now, there's funding strategies built into everything from rodeo arena to highway 500 miles per hour. So it's small steps.
Well, I think, if I'm understanding your question right, I think what we need some assumptions from someone maybe driving this, assumptions on growth. And I would suspect that we probably would not have a fixed assumption, but instead we have maybe different scenarios. You have a rapid development scenario, you have a slow development scenario, and maybe a stagnant development scenario, something like that, because that's going to also play into the resource allocation for the next phase of the fleet structure. I mean, for example, at 2001, 2002, a 15-year timetable would probably have predicted much more development by now, except for the recession that's already had about 150 years. So dates aren't as important as assumptions and projections on what's coming down the road.
And that's a good point, if you don't mind.
No.
Add to that.
That's what we're here for.
This is what the advantage we have coordinating with community development is we know, for instance, even in the northwest part of the county, there's areas where we know national home builders are building now, and we know what they intend on doing over the next 2 years with regard to existing lots that have been taken down, plus deals that are ongoing. So even in the northwest area, there are hotspots now with respect to the last few years, and then there are other areas where we've got replatting of subdivisions that were entitled in 2007 that are now starting to get re-looked at, but we know that that's a 5 to 10 year window. So based on what we see, it's going to be a lot better than when we wrote the transportation master plan that was entirely based on projections that made sense in 2005. And you're right, it was crazy growth. I mean, back then, Elbert County was the fastest per capita county growth in the state. So,
But even at that's going to be a challenge for all of us. And I was talking with Sean a couple weeks ago about it. Is developers used to come in and buy up big old chunks of land and then have a 5 or a 10 year build out. Now it's a much shortened window, and they're not willing to project out that 5 or 10 years because nobody really knows what the heck is going to happen. So that's going to be a challenge for us. And that's why I don't think that our master plan needs to be as specific as saying, okay, we need a 50-inch raw water line that runs down this highway and then tees off here. But it should be built so that regardless of where that development takes place, we can just pick it up and put that model, tweak it a little bit for that geography, and make it run from there.
and one thing Kurt mentioned, you all have service plans. Looking at absorption rates for your own developments and seeing what, when they were approved, it's one thing, how do they look now? What, if we were to redo them now, this is where I think collectively we really come up with a pretty good idea of where Elbert County is going to go over the next 5 to 10 years, starting with that information, what's valid, what's not valid, and what, based on what we know now, what's a good path forward. We know, for instance, if we had water and sewer on 166, then it would look a lot like 80. We know that is something that once that happens to be the first area, or we maybe closer to Elizabeth and then growing out makes sense. That is going to really entice a lot of the people that Kyle deals with on a daily, weekly basis that come into talk about taking down land and doing things that really have water and sewer as the biggest thing.
Well, that question within the context of funding and everything else, without having to redo it every time something changes, right? Brian's point, whether there's rapid growth, slow growth. It's a modular sort of plan where you can scale it up, scale it back without redoing everything, whether it's engineering or whether it's actual physical work. Right? Not that that's not physical work.
I think too, and this is just a personal opinion. I think too, in the past we've looked at master plans and we haven't really put real, true economic indicators into them. We've looked at what's happened historically. We've looked at growth rates, and we spread them out over time. And I think that sometimes economic indicators, because I'll tell you, in 2005, many of us knew what was coming down the road. We're like, this hand over fist isn't real, but okay, have at it. So that there's some resources and some input that we could actually harness for what I think would be a more meaningful plan.
Yeah. And this is, I think, right now we're talking about a path forward, really the first couple of steps. The next time this group meets, I think having a good idea of what the master plan will look like, that's something that we'll take away with Bill's group and come back and lay it out all out, and if it makes sense to you, then it's worth quantifying and costing all of that. And until this group decides, this is not just going to be another document that sits on the shelf, it's something that can resonate with everybody, both now and over the course of when it gets written. I like the idea of writing it in an abbreviated period of time and then adjusting it over another abbreviated period of time. That's how we've done the other plans. And they seem to, I don't know, Ed, I think they're still pretty valid.
Yeah, and they're easy to adjust or accommodate for changes taking place.
The other thing is the quicker it's done, we've used Transportation Master Plan and the Fairgrounds Plan as funding mechanisms. The county was just awarded $1 million for County Road 29, partly because these guys answered well, but also because they had a master plan that said we need this done. And with that plan, it's just easier to look at funding mechanisms that allow in that plan to take what you have and enhance it. if we can do that, take all of the water districts that are there right now, and find a way to improve each one of them in a mutually beneficial way, that's, I think, one of the underlying goals. Not to create something new and different that adequates what we have. Take what we have and based on today, make it fit today and what we see for growth in the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, like I said, I don't expect to spend a lot of money initially, on this concept, if you will, or the draft plan. We've got some small pots of money that we'll be able to use to start off. But thank you for hitting on that. I was going to say that exactly. We use those master plans for other projects to then go to the state or the federal government and look for assistance. And while the grant sources are drying up at the federal level and a lot of them at the state level, there's still a lot of planning grants that are available. Because, that's the impetus of government anymore, is that responsible planning instead of just a shotgun approach to development. So I think that if we have a good draft plan, that will help us to then look for other funding sources and then move the project forward. Plus, it's going to show a good faith effort or a good promotional effort to developers, whether it's commercial or residential here in the county, that, hey, we are thinking more than just what's going to happen in September. We're looking 5, 10, 15, or 20 years down the road.
And if it's residential or commercial, that's the first thing they're going to want to look at is what is that municipality or governmental entity, what do they have for planning, what do our ideas with regard to growth in or around Elizabeth or further north, does that jive with what Elizabeth or what Elbert County wants? And the site select position, as all know, they check those boxes, and if that box isn't checked, they go somewhere else. They go to Parker or Douglas County.
And I don't know if you guys are aware, but one of the other projects that we're working on right now, Robert sits on one of the water district roundtables, Larry sits on one, and so does Kyle. But we're trying to pull together some grant money so that we can do a water, I can't remember the actual terminology. It's going to track what the aquifers are doing. Are they going up? Are they going down? How fast are we depleting them? What does our future water supply look like? Part of that study that we're doing is not only to track what it's doing, but also to formulate a long-range water supply plan for the county. So are the aquifers sufficient to keep us growing, or are we going to have to look at something else? And so there's some dollars built into that project as well, some grant dollars. And if we're successful at bringing all those in, this will just help to blend into that. So, and that's the idea, like Kyle said. We've got our master plan that we're updating. We'll have our water master plan. We have to update our transportation master plan, and they should all blend together. They shouldn't work in competition with one another. They should work in concert. That's the overall vision. Okay. So at that, I would just like to open it up. And am I all wet? Are we barking down the wrong trail? Do you think it has plans or it has legs? And are you interested in playing? And I know you were the last one in, so I'll ask you first.
Well, I think it's a good approach. As we've talked about before, as I mentioned, Elizabeth has excess capacity in both water and wastewater. So there's capacity there that's not being utilized. We would like to see some development, and I think it's a good mix. And I think having a master plan to guide that is a good thing.
Okay. So you guys are interested in playing?
We are.
Perfect.
Michael?
Did he answer the 2 years ago?
I'll just like, sure.
I second.
And is this something you see the districts playing a part in?
I'll just speak for I think that's without being myopic about it. Like I said last time in the meeting, we're on the very northwest edge of the county, and so as more and more development happens there, there's developers that bought land there. Being able to and having a plan to embrace what's actually coming instead of putting up sort of a wall with not having something that's attractive to folks, and actually having an idea of when and if it comes, this is how it'll look.
Sure.
That's important too. I think people that move into Elbert County that are used to living in Douglas or other more developed counties personally. And I was kind of from Douglas County, grew up in Jeffco. This was the first sort of property area that I bought into. And part of that was because adjacent to our development is developed property. I'm part of Elbert County. I'd like to see that remain in the county and see our county grow too.
Sure. And I think that's our challenge, and when I say our, I mean counties, yours as well. I mean, that's really the next viable place that we're going to see a lot of development. I mean, the King Soopers Master Center is going up right now, and we're seeing things move out closer to the country club out there, and it's going to impact us in a short time frame, I think. We're going to be challenged with that, because I would think that the easiest thing for a developer would do is to reach out to Aurora, because they've already got infrastructure within a couple hundred feet or half a mile of the intersection up there at 194 and Elbert. I personally don't want to see Aurora, infrastructure coming to the county, but that's up to the developer. But I think it's going to be a challenge for the metropolitan districts that are in that portion of the county, as well as county government, to make sure that we do things responsibly and not just do a hit and miss approach.
Well, so I kind of view us as the tip of the spear, at least in this way. Maybe Elizabeth is as well, solid, or where we are. But having said that, the King Soopers is going up. I mean, we haven't had pizza delivered to our house in 9 years.
I know.
So that's all good, but I think those are things that are opportunities for businesses and
Sure.
I think that part of the master plan needs to kind of advertise a little bit to the folks as well. Like, if you look at the town of Elizabeth, people drive through our county, and developers are thinking, man, I'm going to have to put this infrastructure in, I don't know if they're going to be capable, and they start second guessing themselves. I think it's important that we advertise that town of Elizabeth has a lot of room to grow. We have up to 0.3 MGD available. We have X amount of water, and I think I know what you're talking about. There are aquifers ready to go, and that's part of the master plan. So when I say I concur, I think that's great, because we have to advertise that, tell the developers, tell everybody in the neighborhood that town of Elizabeth can hold up to 500,000 gallons of water a day through the wastewater treatment plant. Therefore, we're ready for you. We're ready for growth. We just have to get the infrastructure to you, or vice versa, you come to us. But we're there, and I think when people drive through the community in Elizabeth, small little town, I don't think they think of these package plants, and they think that, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to invest in a lot of money to help them get their plant or whatever bigger. When it's already done, it's already legwork, it's already been done for them. There's lift stations already. Elizabeth has 3 lift stations. They have, 2 lift stations, and like I said, the treatment plant that's 0.5 MGD, and we're only expending 200,000 gallons, if even that.
And you can expand your facilities as well.
And we can. We have lots of room for growth. For the vaults for the lift stations have been overly built. We have small pumps in there now. However, when like the Walmart district starts growing, the other property that annexed in the town, when it's growing, we can lift those pumps out and put appropriate pumps in there again, and we're still ready to go.
Outstanding. Anybody else?
I guess I'll speak up for the east end of the county. Actually, Lyman currently is totally located in Lincoln County. Our city limits reflect the east end of Elbert County, and we've had interest occasionally from the developer, the property owner that is right across the fence line from our water treatment plant. And you talk about that additional capacity that we have. Our water treatment plant is a 2 million gallon per day water treatment plant. Maximum capacity that we use at peak is about 1.3 million. So we have 0.7 million gallons of treatment. In wastewater, we have about 0.4 million gallon ability yet to expand. Certainly have that. Most of our wells are located in Elbert County, from as far west as 9 miles from Lyman. So some of that infrastructure is in place, some is not, but we certainly want to be at the table to discuss what that opportunity might present on the east end of the county.
Yeah, I didn't mean to discount the eastern side.
Well, it's certainly not going to have the likelihood to grow like the west end is, but we need that plan for.
But the highway goes right through there too. So that's
Certainly goes right through there.
Yeah.
But I think it shows the potential for this county if you take it all the way across the board instead of just one area. It gives the developer an idea that, if I were to be successful here, I can be successful in another part of Elbert County because they are having facilities. And you guys being out there right next to I-70 makes transportation a lot easier too.
Anybody else?
One more thought on maintenance schedule. There's a strategy behind it that also has to do with, as new projects are entitled through the county, there's going to be offsite improvements that traditionally we've not really been very good at quantifying. Because of that, ended up with a lot of missed opportunities. So if the developer wants to come in and there's a plan to quantify what those offsite improvements for water and wastewater are, it's just easier to get that straightened out and have it while you're still entitled as opposed to trying to negotiate out of that. So I think a big part of what we want. It's something before the end of the year.
So it goes back to the question, what's the assumption, right? Is that still the question, and or the assumption based on small discussion we just had?
I think that, this probably isn't the session, maybe the next working session is where we do hammer out what are the ground rules for the study. The interesting thing about Elbert County, at least my impression, is that there's a lot of really good master plans all up and down the Front Range. There's a uniqueness to this county that you'll never be able to take something that works in Douglas County and make it Parker, the same thing. So really coming up with something that captures the uniqueness of a growing town like Elizabeth with the Parker-like growth where you live, with the real sort of historic ranch feel that, quite frankly, this is what brings people to Elbert County. How do you keep all of that vibrant without compromising any of those three really important aspects of the county? So it's going to be fun to see how the scope does end up materializing. And I think the goal will be to make sure that everybody understands how it will benefit them individually and us as a group.
And I think what Sean said earlier too is we're going to have to look at, these guys are going to spearhead the project, and we'll have to look outside and see what other master plans are available. Because again, plagiarism is a great thing if somebody's got a good format or a structure. But then we're going to lean on you guys a lot too to find out what your service delivery plans look like. What are your projections? From the county side, we'll work and we'll try to figure out where we think things are going. But you're at a much closer level to the public and the developers than we are. And so we're going to look to all of the metropolitan districts or the water districts to give us an idea of what you foresee is the hot areas that may grow or what your needs may be to move forward.
Without that, it's just another document that sits on a shelf. It really needs to have that kind of intimacy with each area. Not that your water district's completely different. It's great. We just need to capture that and figure out how best to leverage that uniqueness in a way that maybe we can find money, indeed we can attract the kind of development we want to see. Because it's telling the story. I mean, that's really what we're doing. Telling a story that has several layers.
I think you have a couple of key points. One of the reasons we moved to Elbert County is because it is an open space, ranchy field, but the convenience of having everything right there in Aurora. May surprise you, maybe not. I mean, our water district has a lot of capacity as well, and our metro district also has a lot of excess water. Having said that, our community is actually relatively small. It's only 72 homes, 75 homes, or something like that, all 5 acre properties. We know there's developers that are adjacent, and there were plans to develop those areas, and I think that those developments have even been planted.
They have an Eagle View house.
Yeah, Eagle View.
Yeah.
And so...
And I believe Bandera has also.
Bandera's but
Yeah. But from what I gathered from Jan
Eagle View and
Hawley,
Whisper are less far along than Bandera.
from what I have learned from Bart Brendish and Jan Hawley at Cordillera, that has been tabled for at least 10 years.
Which one, Bandera or Eagle?
Both. They're acquiring Bandera, but they have no plans to develop that water. I hate to interject this, but when I built my house 20 years ago, I attempted to put in a gray water system. And I don't understand why we can't throw that into this mix too.
I agree 100%.
You know, it would make so much more, I mean, yeah, your raw sewage, that's a whole other issue. But if you can, you know, especially when you drive through areas and you see somebody that's, and I went from 1,200 acres to 5, so I'll shrink down a little bit with my water thinking. But, you know, when you see people out running sprinklers to water their trees instead of having a soak system, and why are they using what little water resources we have? Why can't we implement that in this county and start something new? Start saying, you know, okay, from this day forward, developers, when you build a house, you're putting in a gray water system. At least that's reusing 90% of the water that they're using into something else.
There's when you look at the state water plan, and that's one of the things that we've been working on, those things, and there's actually some ratios, and one of the things we are utterly lacking in is reuse.
Right.
We don't have them.
Right.
Everything goes away.
Yeah.
And
So
that is
centric.
absolutely, and that is a component that we absolutely have to look at. And I believe that the state is going to be harder and harder on communities that don't have that as a part of their development. And so gray water is simply one of them, and I've done the same thing. I tried to put gray water into Teller County, and they screamed at me. I was still capturing it in my shower and watering my plants. Sorry, you know. So I believe that is
Well,
part of that.
Douglas County, at least their conservation district, has a rainwater harvest system. Why don't we have that out here?
Well, that's actually regulated by the state, and
Right.
the state will allow the permits, and the permits can be held, but you can only do it off of residents
Right.
and all of that, and
And
everybody can do that.
Right, but I mean, it has made a big impact in portions of, especially the more rural areas of Douglas County. These people are loving having the fact that, especially after the water we
You
have.
can water your
Oh, wait.
horses, you can water.
Yeah, you know, you've got a source of collecting water instead of watching it.
That has to be
to
something.
go back to our aquifer.
No, that has to be something going forward. It absolutely has to be something, you know, in our land use regs.
I agree.
Well, and that feeds into our water supply.
Right,
Can be part
right.
of this as well. Is
But that reuse element.
It's huge,
we don't have any reservoirs in the county,
you know?
and so we have to look at
But we
different
have
ways.
63 watershed dams that we could take
Yeah.
use of.
So there's different things that we need to look at, and really nothing is off the table.
Yeah.
I think it would be foolish to say that, and so we have to look at different ways to do business. You know, Douglas County or the Parker Water and Sand District, they're reusing a lot of water from their sewer system. I don't know if you guys have looked at doing any of that or not, but I mean that's what's coming in the future. Water's a finite resource,
Yeah.
and as climate continues to change, and trust me, climate has changed ever since this rock became a planet. It will continue to change, whether it warms up or cools down. And so, you know, we've got to start looking at ways to not just conserve our resources, but find somewhere to store our resources during wet times of the year like we just
Like I
had.
said, there's 63 watershed dams that the Conservation District, which is the only conservation district in the entire United States, has control of those dams. They could be utilized. John Malone has 18 of them on his property. I'm sure that something could be worked out that, you know, some of those dams could be utilized.
Sure. Okay. Anybody else? So, Sean, what do you think the next step is? For you guys to sit down and come up with a plan and then
I think
we
so.
can schedule another meeting?
Yeah, I would say that at least have a framework of the plan as we see it. As presented.
Sure, he's right there.
I'm a substitute.
Oh, okay.
No, I think it's right. Based on what we're hearing today and what the group's needs are and the time frame and what, you know, looking at this phased approach, we can put together a scope that, you know, that first cut of it, and we can work with you, Sean, on how we would envision a plan to meet your expectations. So you guys take a look at that and see if that's what you're looking for.
Can we also include we'll meet from outside water districts, towns, and municipalities?
And what information do you need from the districts, water districts, metro districts to provide water service and sewer service, or the potential of doing that? As part of the plan, I think you sort of need resources out there and abilities. Do you need information from us?
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that I put in the invitation is, what we're going to need to know from you is, you know, what kind of water rights do you have? Is there any infrastructure in place right now?
Sure.
Do you have a capital plan to build those kind of resources? Or is it something that you're going to have to start from scratch. And I think it's pulling together all those different, data points.
So is
it's going to help us.
Do you need that before you put together your next phase?
No.
No.
Okay,
No.
all right.
We'll just assume that we have that, because that's going to really dictate, okay, does it make sense to, what, is it a phased approach that starts at one location or two locations? Elizabeth, you both have capacity, you're 194 and you're at 86. Is it growth that starts from one location or two locations? And it all depends on what can we do as cost effectively as possible based on what's already existing. So we know like the Gold Creek area, we know the capacity there. We've got a finalize a good handle on what the county expects to see for growth in the areas. Growth in paved roads really creates opportunities for development. But I think we can talk about different areas, Lyman and far northwest, 166 St. Louis corridor, Elizabeth, and come up with sort of path forward scope for each area that dovetails, and just describe that to everybody, and make sure it passes a straight face test. It's got to be practical. It has to make its best use with existing infrastructure and plans. I mean, another thing would be if you have capital improvement plans. Let's make sure that we don't fly in the face of those. Let's make sure that we're as consistent as we can be. And then I think ultimately what falls out of the master plan is what's the hierarchy? How do you prioritize improvements and spending money on improvements? If we can pull that off, we've got a good plan that we can all use. It's just as important to Elizabeth as it is to mine.
Well, you've got a town plan. Or how you lay that out in those kind of areas. I mean, even though the developments, the residential developments to 10 years out. Yeah, I mean, it'll still come as fast as a developer sniffs out the opportunity. And what I don't know is where is land where commercial, property would be, allowed to be built. Sure. And how do you service those residential areas that you're trying to attract developers to come to, right? At least in our part of the county, I think that question kind of has to be answered because we're getting butted up against already, and we don't have any plans for how we're going to actually just get that to go in line. Right.
Do you think an action item for the group going home would be to visit their service plans? To visit their capital, are you up to date? If not, where do they need to be improved? Because when we start gathering that information, their projections need to be as up to date as possible, and it may be sometimes since some of you, I don't know.
And I would say anything that's not proprietary that you wouldn't mind sharing with the group would be good to see when we sit down. Somebody said it earlier. We both were, I'm sure, up and down Front Range. We've been involved with water master planning in different municipalities. They aren't necessarily boilerplates that make sense here, but at the same time, we have good information from lots of different sources that we can share. But seeing what we're starting with is a good litmus test to make sure that what we think makes sense, at least we've got a basis for that decision based on what we've seen in a service plan or capital.
So to answer your question, I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think anything that we have relative to service plans or anything is proprietary or confidential anyway. So I think you guys have access to all.
They're all public documents.
It's all public documents. And then the other thing is it's probably a good time for us to revisit because as we were taking over this district as homeowners, plans changed quite a bit.
Sure.
It was on the books.
I think one of the things have changed a lot, and they are going to change a lot in the next year or two. This is what concerns me, and it should concern everybody, because we need to be addressing conservation measures as a proactive step right now. If you just look at our county and you look at the fact that we're going to do a well study, I think it's fair to say that well levels it'll show that well levels have declined and are continuing to decline. That's going to cause a lot of concern with single-family wells, these rural properties. What's going to happen to my well if I get a subdivision on the back door? The other thing to be very concerned about, I think, as a state, is that we're probably going to have some directive by the executive branch in terms of a master plan coming out, and maybe legislative involvement, which also we can't control. And unfortunately, when we're talking about Jefferson County and some of these other counties, they're going to have a big say in this, and that's going to affect all of us. So there is some uncertainty, but in some ways it's a scary process because we don't know what the future will hold, and we're talking water shortages already, and this is in a wet year. Think of how much more it'll be in a drought year. But if we can start talking about conservation measures now, I think it's a proactive approach.
So I think that takeaway from that is it's concerning without having a plan, it's very concerning. When you have a plan, then better decisions can be made.
And you just
But recharge and gray water and reusable water, all of these things need to be, brought to the table now.
But when we talk about conservation, we share the same straw with Castle Rock and Parker. Right? We're talking about Owen County is like we're on our own little island. But we're not. We share the same Denver, we share Arapahoe, we share Dawson with Parker, and Castle Rock, and everybody else, the Winery, and parts of Aurora. What I'm saying, so our conservation plan should kind of be similar to theirs rather than our own. I mean, it is.
Sure.
I don't know if everybody's aware that we all share aquifer and just kind of just
Understand and see the pipes with for these.
Actually, when you get out towards line and cross the line.
You're in the black room.
No, we just, the shallow alluvial is the only water we have out there. We have no deep water. Yeah, about 10 miles east of there is no low water.
Okay.
So that goes
Yeah.
in line with what Sean was saying that makes Elbert County unique. I mean, I totally agree with Sean that makes us more unique because, again, he's not in the deep aquifer. So the plan encompass the whole county with all these.
It's going to regulate growth in a really positive way as well, because I'll just use Greenwood Village as an example. That's a municipality that said we cannot have any more residential, and they didn't know that until they did their own similar study on residential development within the boundaries, and they realized there's nothing we can do that won't cost us money for more than 10 years. And so because of that, that was helped them understand their own limitations. So this is going to show attributes, it's going to show constraints as well. And from a planning standpoint, it will help make the decisions that, because every developer thinks that their project is the best in the world, and it's going to be the best in the world for Elizabeth or Elbert County or Lyman. We're, as regulators, we can enforce regulations, we can interpret. So if we have something that we can enforce, it's just going to make better decisions with regard to all of them, whether it's commercial or residential, or maybe industrial out in the line.
A couple of the things the Big Sandy District are concerned about is the density of development. Certainly a big factor in what we need. And the other thing, the district board is having discussions on state regulations allow 15 acre feet per small capacity well. And we are going to be exploring what a lower limit is sensible. And right now that discussion is 3 to 4 acre feet, which is a lot for a personal residence, but not so much if you have cattle that are right now. We're getting those discussions. Good. The other thing, talking about development, touching hats, town of Lyman, we are undertaking a comprehensive plan, actually sent out RFPs last week. And part of that is a discussion for a 3-mile plan development. So when we do be having discussions with Elbert County on what that looks like, to include water and sewer.
Anything else? Well, with that, I would just say, did everybody get a chance to sign in so we have your contact information? I know a couple folks came in late. Are any of you from a water district? If I can get your contact information on a sign-in sheet before you leave, I want to make sure you're on the distribution list and on the invite list. Okay. You guys have anything else that you would like to say? What? Because your sheet. This? No, you can't. Great. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Like I said, it's going to be kind of an aggressive schedule, but I think we're moving in a positive direction, and I look forward to the initial draft and the initial results. I think we'll be good.